Sure.
Doug, can you do the roll call? Or who would do the roll call?
Yeah, I'll start with the roll call.
Okay.
Commissioner Jesty.
Aye, present.
Commissioner Solomon.
Present.
Commissioner Samples.
Here.
Commissioner Conroy.
Here.
Chair Woodham.
Here.
And absent is Commissioner Martin and Commissioner Johnson.
Okay. Join me in a salute to the flag, if you will. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America.
Of the United States
of America, and to the republic
for which it stands.
And one nation under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the order of agenda.
Seconded.
I think we can do this by acclamation without a roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I don't think there were any blue folder items, were there, Jennifer?
We just had the 5-year financial plan that I think we might just continue to next month's meeting as it's been done in the past in May, because we've got a heavy agenda tonight as well.
Okay. And on the consent calendar, we have just one item. Affidavit for posting the regular Budget and Finance Commission meeting. Do I have a motion to accept that? Or first, is anyone, I guess there's only one item, so we can discuss that or approve it by vote. Does anyone have any objection to the consent calendar? If not, do we have a motion to accept?
Motion to approve the consent calendar item E1.
You're a second?
Oh, excuse me, F1, beg your pardon.
F1. Was there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public participation on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone, either email or e-comments, Jennifer?
There's neither e-comments or any public participation.
Okay. And there are no items that I show carried over from previous agenda. So we'll move into item J, items for discussion. And I'll turn that over to Jennifer or Mike. How do you want to handle this?
I'll just introduce our city manager, Mike Wodzansky, to kick off this topic. Thanks.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see you again. It's nice to do this periodically. I think we last spoke in February, right? Is that right? Or was it March? Time is taken away from me. Tonight, really, we're using your body as a facilitation for sort of two things. That's one, primarily to receive input from all of you as we begin to prepare the 22-23 fiscal year operating budget, and then also to allow the community to participate in a more relaxed form through what we're calling our second community or budget workshop, talk about our preparation. Our goal is to really solicit input in advance of the preparation of the document rather than seek opinions of the document after it's been delivered to the city council for consideration. So we're making a concerted effort this year to reach out to commissions, to reach out to the public, to really gather and solicit that feedback before we finalize the annual budget. And tonight we're looking forward to that, doing that with all of you. And really not a lot of a presentation for me tonight. I'll be here to answer questions, to give guidance where appropriate, but really to put, kind of my listening hat on and hear from all of you and really take notes. But to kind of help prime the pump a little bit, we did different presentations as part of our first workshop with the community, which we actually held in person at the city council chambers. It was our first sort of trial run of the facility. Eugene came down and, almost added 50% to our audience count, which was great. But we have tonight both of our chiefs, Police Chief Joe Hoffman and Fire Chief Keith Kaufman. They're going to provide brief presentations just to sort of prime the pump, talk a little bit about how we deliver service in those two critical departments. And if you have any specific questions of those two as part of their presentations, we'll let them do that immediately following. So we're going to start with police as listed in the agenda, and then we'll move it over to Keith and go from there. So I think, Joe, you're going to want to share your screen. So that's why everybody, and we'll be here to answer questions afterwards.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, Commissioner. Let me share my screen here. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to sharing some of the exciting stuff that we have going on with the police department and how we're looking to focus coming up into fiscal year 22-23 and share everything with you. I've met many of you in the past, although I'm new into the chief of police position. I've been with the city for over 28 years and very familiar with Redondo Beach, and I'm looking forward to providing you information as we move forward. So I just wanted to start by providing a little bit of an overview of the organization of the Redondo Beach Police Department. So essentially, we have the police department broken up into three main bureaus, which are all led by a captain. There's a patrol bureau, which is the largest bureau of sworn personnel, which is primarily responsible for all the calls for service that are received that come into the communications via 911 or even via the non-emergency line. And that's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With a minimum of 5 officers, but it varies depending on the time of the day and the day of the week, how many officers may be out in the field. But that's generally the police officers that'll be driving around in the marked police vehicles, responding to calls for service. We have a full service jail at the police department, and the jail is also included within the patrol bureau as far as the chain of command. Jumping over to the left side of that organization chart is a special operations bureau. Special Operations Bureau is the majority of the police department personnel that work out of the Annex building at 200 North Pacific Coast Highway, which is across the street from the City Hall campus, and primarily consists of our investigations division, our traffic unit, the community-based officers, and our quality of life unit. And crossing guards, MSOs, they're all included within the Special Operations Bureau and handle a variety of inquiries and calls for service and requests that come into the police department. The Support Services Bureau is mainly consisted of professional staff and is an essential component of being a full service police department, and includes our communications unit, which is staffed with a complaint taker for 911 calls, police dispatch, fire dispatch. We have supervisors down there and make sure that when citizens need service and the calls come in, that we can respond to the calls in a very efficient manner and get the resources out there as needed. It also includes our records division, which processes all of the records that the police department handles, and personnel and training, which manages all of our hiring and required training courses for the police department. So that's just a very brief overview of the three main bureaus that the police department is broken up into and how we conduct our operations. This screen here just kind of shows the number of people that we have in each division. So if you were to look, administration is chief, captains, executive assistant, financial analyst, professional standards unit, limited to 7 people. Patrol has the bulk of the personnel in our organization. We currently have 153, or we're authorized for 153 full-time employees. So with these numbers, you can see where the bulk of the personnel are broken down into. With all the personnel that we have in the various bureaus in the police department, I pulled down a handful of key performance measures that show the type of service that we provide with the personnel and the resources that we have. So looking at the number of hours of patrol that we provide to the community, that number works out to 118,000 hours of patrol hours in the community. And the arrest and jail processing, that's how many bookings that our jail is completing on an annual basis, which is 2,100. Investigations is basically the types of reports that elevate to the level that a detective reviews the case. Not all reports are subject to investigation by a detective based on the nature of the complaint, the crime, or what have you. But 23,500 of those actually do rise to that level where they're reviewed by detectives and often include additional follow-up. This one's important here, 911 calls. We strive to answer those in 10 seconds, and we're taking in about 20,000 911 calls annually. And getting those calls answered quickly and then working seamlessly so that information can be pushed out to police and fire dispatch and resources sent while information is still coming in on the complaint line is what we strive to do. And that's why we have multiple operators working in communications at each time. Traffic citations is traffic complaints is typically the issue that rises to the top as far as our complaint areas in the city. And we're at about 6,125 traffic citations. Parking violations, which is another area that we get a lot of complaints and inquiries, and is also definitely a quality of life issue and also a revenue generator. We are at 34,500 parking sites, which is right on our estimate for about $2.3 million in revenue for the current fiscal year, which we're on target for based on our year-to-date revenue generation. And then police reports processed, 7,500. So that number fluctuates. During COVID, it was down a little bit. It goes up in times when there's more stuff going on, but about 7,500 reports is the number where we're at. These are just some performance measures from statistics that we've drawn down on to provide a very brief and general overview of some of the services that we provide based on the funding and resources that we have available. So this screen, I didn't put any bullet points on because I just wanted to make sure that I was able to accurately express the vision of the police department, which is we are the community leading the way in law enforcement. And this is the standard that we try to compare all the services that we provide is what we're doing actually demonstrating that the police department is ingrained in the community, and what affects the community affects the police department. And are we constantly pushing ourselves to identify new methods in innovative thinking and technology so that we can provide services in unconventional ways so that we can continue to provide excellent service and exceed our own expectations. I put trust and safety at the bottom because trust and safety are two metrics that I feel are the standards that are used to measure all the levels of service that we provide. For any level of service, any interaction with the community, I think that it can be looked at, did that specific contact, interaction, report, arrest, whatever it is, did that have a positive or a negative effect on the level of trust that the police department has with the community? And did it make that citizen or resident that requested the services or was the recipient of that services feel safer or less safe? It's a very simple metric. It doesn't complicate matters. And it allows me to look at incidents in a very rapid manner and determine, was there a positive or negative effect on the level of trust and level of safety that we were providing to the community? And by using that as the metric, I think that it allows us to constantly assess and adjust our strategies so that we can constantly make sure that we're striving to always build trust in the community and always try to make sure that we're providing the safest environment possible. I wanted to add a couple of platforms that we use at the police department that help us assess the way that we're interacting with the community. One of the pieces of technology that we use is called SpiderTech, and it's a customer communication survey tool, which is essentially used when somebody has requested services from us. Somebody calls dispatch and reports a car accident, a burglary report, and they're requesting some sort of level of service. We have an automated program to where there's a follow-up message sent to the caller that asks a series of very, very simple questions. So that way we're able to get a high response rate because the questions and answers don't take much time. The questions are answered on a scale of 1 to 3. And we had 1,848 messages. This is just a snapshot in time. And you can see there that the score was 2.85% of those 1,848 were satisfied, 2.8 satisfied with the response time, with an overall customer service rating of 2.77. So obviously there's a little bit of room for improvement there, but with that kind of volume of calls for service and that type of response from the people that are getting these surveys, It's a good indicator for us as how we're doing. And it also provides additional feedback, specific call types, actual individual department members that were involved in these calls, and does allow for follow-up when appropriate for either corrective action or to provide kudos. So we can make sure that we're reinforcing the behavior that allows us to provide the service that we're expected. This is another program that we're using. It's called Zen City, and this is a public opinion polling software. So the one that I just showed you previously, SpiderTech, is getting information from callers. This one is generally from people in the community that have not requested police services, because there's definitely a different level of concern for various issues based on if somebody has called the police requesting services, maybe they were a victim of a burglary or they were involved in a car accident, as opposed to a resident in the city that has not needed services. So I understand that on the screen, it's a little bit hard to read that, but I just wanted to explain a couple of things on there. Is that, as I explained before about the importance in trust and safety, the metrics that are on these Zen City reports we get on a regular basis are trust and safety. And we actually get a citywide trust score based on all the responses, which allows us to identify how we're doing. And over times recently, with things that have gone, civil unrest and such over the past couple of years, we're able to see a distinct downturn or an uptick when things increase with the levels of trust for law enforcement. The bar graph chart on the bottom left of that, where it shows streets and traffic, that is typically near the top and at the top in the 30% range for the number one issue that is identified by the residents, or actually they're not necessarily even residents, but by the respondents to this public opinion polling software. And then homelessness and thefts usually tick back and forth between number 2 and 3, rounding out our top 3 items, which are the streets and traffic related issues, homelessness, and theft related items. So on this chart right here, what I wanted to show was just kind of a breakdown on our overall budget and what percentage, where our budget is allocated. So the blue portion of that graph indicates the amount of our budget that is allocated towards personnel. So our budget's roughly $43 million currently, and about 63% of that, or roughly $27 million, is allocated to personnel. And I think the important focus there is, we use this term a lot, is that the police department is a customer service organization. We just have a law enforcement focus. So in order to be a customer service organization and provide the services that we're expected, it requires a lot of personnel. Like I mentioned, we have 153 full-time personnel, where that's what we're authorized for. And I feel that we've allocated those resources appropriately so that we can continue to get those trust and safety scores high and provide that excellent service. The orange bar in the middle there is the M&O, which is a very small amount of our overall budget, which is only around $2 million. And then the gray rounds out our budget, which is the internal service funds. So just a snapshot, but the purpose of this graph was to just provide a very brief overview and illustration of the focus that we have on personnel and maintaining personnel in order to provide the services. The primary funding sources that we have for the police department are the general fund, the Tidelands and Uplands, and the Emergency Communications Fund, which ties right into the general fund. We do pursue additional sources of revenue for a lot of the law enforcement projects and equipment that we have, such as asset forfeiture. We funded a lot of our body-worn camera program, which is a very important program for reducing liability and increasing accountability, transparency, and trust through our asset forfeiture program. We have the Supplemental Law Enforcement Services Grant, which is how we funded a lot of our drone programs, and the Drone as a First Responder program, which is increased safety in the community by getting a view of these incidents a lot quicker by having advanced technology available. We use the Office of Traffic Safety grants for traffic-related issues. We've done primary collision factor enforcement, various bicycle and pedestrian enforcement, the bike rodeos, and periodically DUI checkpoints. Some of that has slowed down a little bit during the COVID times, but recently the checkpoints are starting back up, and those are funded through the Office of Traffic Safety. State Homeland Security Program, a lot of those programs and projects are regional in nature. We've done communications projects, infrastructure for radios, homeland security or terrorism related projects. We actually have something going to council soon that's a regional program for a Skywatch tower and a suitable towing vehicle that's on the agenda for next week. And a lot of those programs, like I said, are regional in nature with a terrorism nexus. And we've been working on those grants for many, many years. Justice assistance grants, or what we call JAG grants, we get a small amount of money there, and that's how we were able to put AEDs in the patrol vehicles and train all the officers. So we have additional life-saving equipment available, and all of these are funded through outside sources and don't have an effect on the general fund at all. I wanted to include this slide that I had used in a previous presentation, but just to kind of talk about some of the changes that are going on in society that the police department needs to focus on, and that's the crime rates. So you'll see from 2016 to 2019, there was a dip in crime, and right down to 2020, and then in 2021, it went right back up 17%. So it went down 19 and then up 17. And it's a nationwide issue. This isn't just Redondo Beach. This isn't just Los Angeles County or California. Crime rates are on the rise all throughout the nation, and it's something that we have to focus on and allocate our resources to make sure that we're doing everything to provide those services to keep the nation safe. Aggravated assaults, which is a troubling category, there's been a rise in those, and the thefts. We've seen organized retail crime has been widely publicized with the way that businesses are the smash and grab, so to speak. And then also locally, the amount of catalytic converter thefts. And we've tried to put programs in place where we do the etching programs and special details and surveillances, working with outside vendors to provide the security cages to try to reduce those thefts, walking the neighborhoods and placing flyers on cars that could be target vehicles. We're now going to be pursuing the presentation of an ordinance that'll give us some more local teeth if we do catch people. But unfortunately, the consequences aren't there for the people that are being arrested for these thefts, and some of the policies that are in place, we're not able to keep the offenders in custody, and we're seeing a lot of repeat offenders. One troubling statistic is the rise on assaults on police officers. It's a scary trend. It's been increasing rapidly over the course of 2021, and it has to do with the overall rise in crime. It's something that we need to pay particular attention to, which ties right into the number of firearms that are being recovered. And Redondo Beach is not immune to that. The number of firearms that we've recovered in Redondo Beach has gone up drastically in 2021, and in the first couple months of 2022, we're still on pace to see those record number of firearm seizures. Good news is our officers are out there performing that work and recovering those firearms, but it is a scary statistic nonetheless. So here's some of the priorities, just a high-level overview that we want to focus on in fiscal year 2022 and 2023 is the recruitment and retention of Redondo Beach police personnel. We're authorized for 95 now. We're going to be looking to increase that. However, right now we're down about 7 police officers, soon to be 8, and it's challenging to hire qualified candidates right now and have them successfully complete the training program and be able to serve the public. So that's definitely going to be a focus as we move through the next fiscal year. The expansion of our quality of life unit. We have a quality of life officer. We have a homeless liaison officer. The police department recently assumed responsibilities for code enforcement over the past couple of years, and quality of life issues are a significant concern in the city of Redondo Beach. So therefore, they're a significant concern for the police department. We're looking to expand the quality of life unit by adding a full-time sworn supervisor that will be able to help establish the priorities and direct personnel to make sure that we're responding appropriately to community need, and also adding part-time code enforcement officers so that we can do 2 things really. One, get part-time personnel trained up so that we can actually have coverage over 7 days of the week and more hours during the day, but also have a succession plan in place. So as full-time code enforcement officers move on, we have staff that's ready to step into those roles so we don't diminish the quality of service that we're providing to the city. The unique community engagement. I was very fortunate that when I stepped into this role, I stepped in from a solid foundation, mostly that was built by Chief Kaufman with the innovative ideas that he brought in, the way we did community outreach. Ideas that in the early part of my career, I wouldn't have thought had a place in law enforcement for engaging with the community. It's really transitioned law enforcement for the city of Redondo Beach. And I think it's put the city of Redondo Beach and our police department on the map as a model for others on how to engage with the community. I want to continue with the unique community engagement that we have because it really draws on the interests of the community and it humanizes the badge and allows our personnel to use the hobbies that they have to really build that trust in the community. I mean, if you would have asked me a couple of years ago if we would have had a snow cone machine and be buying 200 pounds of ice on a regular basis to make green snow cones on St. Patrick's Day, I never would have thought that that was going to be something that we would be focusing on. But the amount of positive community interaction that we get from those types of events is impressive. And I want to continue to build on the community engagement through a highly dedicated community-based officer program that includes our school resource officers, a full-time community-based officer, and a supervisor in that unit, as well as other volunteers that we have that help us structure the programs that are in place and have proven to be successful. Infrastructure upgrades are something that we're going to need to focus on. There's been a concern about increasing law enforcement presence in the Pier and Harbor area. And with reductions in staffing over the past several years, the Pier substation hasn't been fully staffed and has deteriorated a little bit. We recently worked with our IT department. We now have 5 fully functional workstations in the Pier substation as of yesterday, actually. And we're going to be looking to transfer personnel down there to increase police presence in the Pier and Harbor area, and also looking to do some upgrades so that we can make that facility more user-friendly and attractive to the community. There's a lot of technology out there that we can use that increases our efficiency as a police department and makes us more effective in the way that we engage and also the way that we can fight crime. So we're going to be looking at the available technology as we move through the next fiscal year and constantly trying to conduct an analysis on what's available so that we can present new ideas and continue moving forward and trying to stay ahead of the curve and not behind it. Because the pace that technology is moving, law enforcement needs to move with it. And that's one of the commitments we have here at the Redondo Beach Police Department. Succession planning. I mentioned it a little bit before, but there's a lot of changes going on in the organization. We're hiring for multiple positions right now. And I think that we really need to continue to focus on the mentoring and preparation of our candidates and department personnel so that we can create the culture of having personnel that are ready to step into the next roles. Because although we have very, very well-functioning units right now, if we don't have people prepared to step into those roles in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, it could degrade the quality of service that we provide. So the time is now to prepare our individuals, attract qualified candidates, provide the exposure that's needed so that when the opportunities present themselves, we have capable internal candidates ready of stepping into the roles that understand the needs of the community and are able to represent Redondo Beach in the way that we demand. And then this last slide here, I asked our community services unit for a handful of photos that show what we're all about. We're out there doing police work. We're out there engraving the catalytic converters, meeting with the public, putting on public presentations, humanizing the badge, and engaging with the community. So hopefully you found this brief overview of the police department operation and some of our budget useful. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any input as we start working on the fiscal year 22-23 budget. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate the presentation. I'm sure there are several questions. Let me start it off with just a couple. You mentioned that you have 153 authorized positions. How many of those are filled now, or how many are empty?
Well, of the 153, let me break that down. So of the 153, that's 95 sworn and 58 non-sworn positions. So of the 95 sworn, we currently have 7 vacancies. So we have 88 filled full-time sworn police officer positions.
And is that about normal over the last 2 or 3 years, or are you?
No, I think that's low. That's low. We were definitely up in the 90s for the longest time. Recruitment was a little bit more challenging during COVID, and we've seen a little bit of a dip in our overall staffing number. And so we're at 88 now. We're going to be down at 87. We have an officer leaving next week. But the concerning number is that we have 3 planned retirements in the calendar year. And then we have other potential officers that are off on injuries that may not return. So we have the potential with that and other officers that may leave for other opportunities to be down up to 15 positions within this current calendar year of 2022, which is a very, very tall order to fill all of those spots. So that's why we have to place such an emphasis on that.
And what are the primary issues that you see in filling those positions? Is it salary or is it other things?
Well, I think that there's a multitude of factors. Salary is always a concern. Pay and benefits is a concern. And it depends. There's a lot of things that factor into that, like working conditions, calls for service, and the community that we have. So it's an individual decision that the candidates have to evaluate when determining where salary factors into that. But there are also other concerns such as vaccine mandates and requirements associated with that could factor in, and also just what's going on in society with the perception of law enforcement and being able to attract qualified candidates. One thing that we can't do is reduce the quality of the candidates that we're hiring just to fill the spots. We have to maintain our standards, even if it means that we're going to have to pick up a little extra slack, because it wouldn't be appropriate for us to hire personnel just to fill those spots if we didn't feel that they were going to be an accurate and proper representation of the police department. So we do have a full-time recruiting officer. We just finished recruitment testing this week. We had 6 candidates come out in the A-band. We started 5 backgrounds today. I gave a conditional offer to a police officer recruit yesterday that'll hopefully be entering the academy in May. And I gave a conditional offer to an LAPD lateral that had 5 years of experience, highly qualified candidate on Tuesday. So we are paying attention to this, keeping our finger on the pulse and our foot on the gas, and we're going to do everything we can to get those spots filled. But we have to make sure that we're maintaining the quality there for the sworn positions. As far as the non-sworn side of those 58 positions, we're seeking to hire a couple of our CSO2 positions, which is the position that mostly operates in the jail. We have a vacant senior admin analyst position, which interviews are scheduled for that within the next 2 weeks. And then we're constantly struggling to fill our positions in the communications center. That's a challenging position. And I think that those positions are almost as difficult to fill as the sworn police officer positions. So we're going to be looking for some ways to attract qualified candidates to the communications unit as we move into the next budget cycle. But it's very, very beneficial for us to maintain a full service communications unit because it provides a very high level of service. But there are some vacancies down there that we're actively working to fill.
Okay, thanks. Eugene, your hand is up.
Yes, Chief, as far as diversity is concerned, of the sworn 95 officers you have, how is our police force position?
I think that our police department is a very accurate reflection of the makeup of the city of Redondo Beach, with the exception that we have hired more female officers over the past several years than we had historically. And I think that that has made us an even more diverse police department based on the makeup of the ratio of male to female police officers, which has provided a whole nother opportunity for us for engagement with the community.
Thank you.
Eugene?
Thanks, Chair Woodham. Thank you, Chief Hoffman. Appreciate the presentation. I have a few questions. Some of it is just to provide a little bit more info for the community, since this is a community workshop. For our traffic citations and our parking citations, do we keep all of that money, or does some of that money go to the vendors who handle that? How does it work? If you know, maybe Jennifer or Mike might weigh in also. When we issue traffic citations and they're paid, how much money of that do we keep? 100%, a portion of it?
I don't have the exact percentage, but my understanding of it is that it depends on the code that we're writing the violation for. When we're issuing citations for vehicle code sections that are going to be processed by LA Superior Court, then less of the money from those violation fines actually comes back to the city of Redondo Beach. However, the parking revenue, which is largely Redondo Beach municipal codes, a greater percentage of that does come back to the city of Redondo Beach. There are fees that we have associated with the use of the devices, the electronic devices that we process the citations and issue the citations with, but it's largely dependent on the exact code that the violation is being written for.
Okay, and Jennifer, does that money go to the general fund when it's sent back to us?
I believe so. I'll have
Okay.
to check on that. Yep.
Great. The asset for a seizure fund is a great tool, I think, for the department. Chief Kaufman might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our Vapor Dog, some of the funding for that may have come from Asset Seizure Fund. And I think that maybe even the police boat we had, some of the funding for that might have come from Asset Seizure Fund. So that's a really nice tool for you to have in your golf bag. Does the department have a grant writer or somebody who goes out looking for JAG funds and other sources of funding for some of our programs?
We do not have a dedicated grant writer, but one of the things that we're trying to work on is our previous financial analyst, Andrea DeLapp, was an admin analyst. And what we did in the mid-year budget cycles was we elevated that position to a senior admin analyst. And we're going to be working to actually create more of a financial unit within the police department, which is going to serve two purposes. One is we're going to be able to have somebody who's more focused on grant management and pursuing grants. And then it adds a succession planning component so that if we do have turnover in the organization, we're able to really stay on top of all the financial obligations and responsibilities that we have as a police department. Many of the grants that we pursue are year-over-year grants that fall more into the basic application, identifying the items that we're seeking to purchase, and then the overall management to make sure that we're in compliance with the agency that's overseeing the grant. There are some other grants out there that we can pursue when we have the staff and resources available and we get that unit in place. I think more opportunities will present themselves.
That sounds like a great program, a great idea moving forward. For infrastructure that we're in need of for Civic Center, for the police department, or for the annex, I think that the Public Works Director, Ted Simon, put together a rough idea of what kind of dollar amount we were talking about might be needed to upgrade some of our facilities. Is that something that you all worked on with the Public Works Director, or is that something that we've got in process to get an idea of what we might look at going forward?
It certainly is. In fact, we helped work on a decision package for a CIP request that will address the public facilities that we think are in need of upgrade. And we work with Public Works to make sure that we incorporated both exterior and interior upgrades to the facilities that are in need. And the numbers that are going to be presented are reflective of all the interdepartmental coordination.
Okay, that's great. That'll help us going down the road. And the last question I have, please, Chief, is for our 15 positions that we might be down, how are we allocating it at? Are we looking to overtime? Are we looking to other departments to help pick up the slack? How are we managing that administrative side of it? Is it mainly overtime expense?
No, we haven't really had to dip into that too much because overtime is one of those things that is taxing on personnel. So what we've tried to do is, and we're not down 15 right now. Basically, we need to hopefully hire 15 in order to get up to full staff.
Got it.
That's a tall order, but we're actually only down 7 right now, and we're able to manage. We've basically thinned out some of the units where it would be ideal to have those units at full complement, such as traffic, investigations, and some of the other units in the city. However, we're still able to provide the level of service with the personnel that's there. And yeah, we're a little bit thin in all the various units, but we don't want to get into a position where we're relying solely on overtime to maintain our core functions, because that's a dangerous precedent to set and will result in mandates and wear down our personnel. So it's more of a strategic approach to looking at the resources that we have available and then allocating them based on need, looking at calls for service, and trying to find that best balance between specialized units and our core functions to make sure that we can provide the service within our core budget.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Chief Hoffman.
Okay, Mel, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chief, thank you for the presentation. Couple of questions. First of all, we're talking about you were mentioning that you were down some number of personnel in dispatch, and at the same time you're able to maintain 20,000 911 calls for service and an answer time of 10 seconds or less. Is that answering all 20,000 calls, or I mean, can you put a little bit more of a framework on that? And I guess what I'm trying to look at, or trying to get an idea of, is Do you have enough people in dispatch to handle the call load and answer the calls in a timely fashion?
No, we don't. And we're able to handle all the calls within 10 seconds, but that is the one unit where we're really wearing those people down thin. And we're asking a lot. They're working more overtime, more shifts, and more mandates than pretty much any unit within the police department. And we're working hard to try to bring that up. Right now, our staffing for the communications unit is authorized for 4 supervisors and 10 emergency service dispatchers. And we're currently at 3 supervisors and 7 emergency service dispatchers. So we need to hire another supervisor and 3 more dispatchers, which would, the level of service that they provide with the resources that they have is amazing. And it provides a lot of quality as far as the citizens are concerned, but the tax that it takes on the personnel that's down there is not sustainable. And we're going to be looking at ways that we can actually hire and retain our personnel in communications, because I want to make perfectly clear that the communications unit is absolutely a priority, and having that as a function of the police department enhances the service and allows us to provide a much higher level of service to the citizens.
Right. So I'm very, very aware of what's going on in dispatch across the country, and we're not the only ones having this problem. It sounds like you're basically trying to staff at least 2 dispatchers and a supervisor 24/7, and you need that head count that you're allocated. You need the 10 and 4 in order to do that, so that you can accommodate paid time off and injuries and on and on. So it's going to be a challenge, and
it is.
If there's anything that we can do to help you with it, I don't know what we can do. It sounds like you're on it, but certainly interested in whatever you come up with. The other question I have is, you were talking about your allocated headcount right now, and you're considering asking for greater headcount next year. Is that because you have a number of people that are off duty, IOD, and maybe going off? So in order to satisfy your budgeting process, you've got to ask for more people, or are you really looking to put more personnel on the street?
No, the personnel that we would be asking for would be to enhance the quality of life unit, so that we could establish a permanent supervisor to oversee all the functions that fall within the quality of life unit, which has become a very prominent area of community need and has demonstrated a absolute need for supervision, because the community-based unit currently has multiple responsibilities with a large span of control, some that are focused on outreach and engagement with the community, where the quality of life is focused on education, but also enforcement. And having supervisors that can focus with those as a primary responsibility, respond to the needs of the community and establish the priorities, I think is going to greatly increase the quality of life in the city of Redondo Beach. So the personnel that we would be asking there for is for that specific supervision level.
Okay. And just one last item has to do with the statistics that you put up. They're pretty impressive. Are those available? Are those published to the community on the website? And are they updated regularly? Because I think those would be good things for the public to just see and know.
Sure, the performance measures, those numbers,
yeah,
that's all included as part of the budget. That's all
as part of the budget, but do you have it, for instance, on the city website so that the community can just see it?
We estimate those numbers during the budget process. So the budget document that is published will include those numbers. So anybody could look up the budget and look at the police department section, and those numbers will be in there anytime. We don't regularly update the police department hours. We look at the number of personnel we have assigned to patrol, how many shifts they're going to be working over the course of the year, and then we estimate that number of patrol service hours. So that's not a number that we have staff dedicated to updating on a regular basis. We do that during the budget cycle and include it in the budget.
No, I think maybe I misspoke somehow. I was talking about the public surveys that you do.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we don't actually put those out there all the time because we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to look at the data, identify the data, and then act on it appropriately. There may be an opportunity for us to take a summary report, put it on our transparency portal on the webpage so that we can make some of the data available, but we would need to make sure that we're not disclosing any sort of information that could be compromising to the police department. But I would be more than happy to work with the vendors and see if there's some sort of a summary report that we can include that would at least provide the public with an overview.
Sure. And my last question, I swear, this is my last one. The metrics that you were showing and the surveys and things, like I said, they're very impressive. But then again, things like call answering times, responses for service, and so forth. There are some national standards for those. Are you going to include those, for instance, in the budget package or other disclosures, or how do you go about maintaining those?
Well, my understanding is that the national standards that are out there are far below the performance measures that we've set for ourselves. So we can take a look at the national standards for 911 call answering and response times, and I'd be happy to include that in presentations as appropriate. I don't believe we actually have a comparison, if that's what you're looking for, with the national standards and with what our data is. But we could take a look at what the national standards are and see if it matches up to what the performance measures are that we're including.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because since they are widely accepted standards, it's a way to kind of benchmark against other departments. And sure. I think it would help us in things like when we're looking at budget, give us an idea of when you're telling us you're down 3 or 4 headcount in dispatch and you need more money. It gives us a better idea when you also have these comparative standards or comparative metrics against other agencies. So that's the only reason I ask. I swear that's my last question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason, your hand is up.
All right, thank you. Hi, Chief Hoffman, and thank you for your presentation. So I think you mentioned that you've been on with the police department for over 20 years. How much of that has been with the Redondo Beach Police Department?
I started at the Redondo Beach Police Department when I was 19 years old in 1994 as a volunteer.
Awesome.
Then I became a cadet, then I became a police officer, and I've worked just about every unit in every rank possible until I got to sit in this seat.
Fantastic. Were you most recently a police captain?
I was.
Thank you. Okay. All right, a few questions. By the way, again, thank you for the presentation. It went by really fast, almost like a blur, and I was like quickly trying to jot down my notes and questions as you went through it. In the future, it might be easier if you, like at the end of each slide, you maybe perhaps ask for questions, but just a suggestion. Okay, a few questions. Is the police department still doing crossing guard duty, or has that been taken care of?
We are. We still have city employees that are staffing crossing guard sections, but we also engaged in a pilot program at the beginning of the 21-22 fiscal year to contract with a company called All City Management to provide contract crossing guard services at select locations. We started with just doing it at a few intersections and as a pilot, and it's been incredibly successful because the crossing guard employees have been a challenging group just based on the COVID and everything that's been going on, and it is proven difficult for us to maintain that staff. And then we end up filling the crossing guard positions with police officers, parking enforcement personnel, and other members of the police department, which takes away from their primary duties of providing service. So the contract agreement for crossing guards has proven successful. At mid-year budget, we went back, City Council approved an increase, and we're now using 6 contract crossing guards, which has allowed us to free up police officers and parking enforcement to be out there focusing on their primary responsibilities. So the current model is a mix, mostly consisting of City of Redondo Beach employees, part-time employees that are conducting the crossing guard services, with a certain number, approximately 6 of the contract employees through the outside company that are filling in the gaps.
And our goal obviously would be to fill it all with non-police personnel.
No, I don't think that's the goal at this point. I think that we're going to be pushing into the fiscal year of maintaining that hybrid model where we still have city employees that are providing crossing guard services at bulk of the intersections, but increasing the level of contract crossing guards so that we can have that balanced mix of the ones that are engaging with the community and city employees that we're able to work with our traffic unit, and then the outside contract employees to make sure that we're filling all the intersections but not drawing down on the other services that we offer.
Okay. Question for you. You talked about the need to fill more, officer positions. We have a current need as well as a future need based on future retirements and people leaving. Do you know offhand roughly what are we paying new police officers?
Well, I would have to give you a range, and I don't have that number off the top of my head, but if we hire them as a police recruit, it's substantially lower than if we bring them in as a police lateral, where they already have some law enforcement experience and would be starting at a higher step. I'll try to get you those numbers and give them to you.
So I was thinking more so after they pass the academy, and then they're actually out on, out.
It's probably in the $80,000 to $90,000 range.
Okay, that's just payroll, not including any benefits, right?
Correct. Yeah, benefits, you're going to look at approximately double.
Yeah. Okay. And you said even with the shortage of personnel, we're able to cover and meet the needs of the city without other officers incurring overtime currently, right?
Well, there's always going to be some overtime when people take time off that they're entitled to, or we have an unexpected injury, or we have a critical incident that is a huge draw on resources, like a fatal traffic collision or a significant crime or something like that. There's always going to be overtime. I think what I want to make sure I'm trying to stress is that we're not relying on overtime to provide our core services. We're using overtime as a means to fill in where we need to or to handle critical incidents.
When we have special things like the Beach Life Festival and things like that, and we have additional officers on working that, is that something that's funded by those events, or is that just covered in our overtime that's paid out by the city?
It's funded by those events.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Question, I saw your different sources of income, but I didn't see any dollars next to it. So I was just curious, what percentage of the police department expenses are covered by these revenue sources versus what percentage is covered by the general fund?
So basically the breakdown between the grants and the general fund?
All sources of other income versus the general fund, I was thinking. Roughly is fine.
So roughly 37 million of the 43 is from the general fund.
Okay.
Well, and maybe to add a little bit to that as well, that doesn't include, I'm assuming, Joe, the communications fund that's
right. Yeah, no communications.
And if you add that in the communications funds, if you back that up through the ISF formula, is largely general fund supported as well. So the vast majority, nearly all of the police department's origin of funding is through one means or the other general fund.
All right, thank you. And obviously the police department's not expected to fund itself or operate as a profit center. I was just curious to what degree. And additionally, I would hope that there wasn't pressure on the police department to maintain a certain level of revenue from parking violations or so forth.
No, but parking issues are a significant concern being a beach community, and it's a quality of life issue. And so we do base revenue projection on the number of sites that we're anticipating to write in a fiscal year. And that's where we got the anticipated revenue number of 2.3 million for the current fiscal year. We're right at about 2 million right now. So we're going to expect to hit that, but that's just based on performing our duties in the expected manner.
Sure, and that's probably based on historic numbers as well, right?
It is, and it also includes parking meter revenue. So that 2.3 million isn't all just from sites from enforcement. That includes the revenue that's gathered from all the parking meters as well.
Got it. How you brought up brought my mind to a point. The smart meters. What's the status on that? Those meters that you.
It's all done. They're all installed.
Okay, wonderful.
The last ones went in last week, I believe, on Francisco. So
fantastic. Okay.
Meters are all in, every single one of them.
Fantastic. Thank you. You mentioned what was it, a 17% increase in crime? What percentage increase do we have in violent crime?
I don't have that exact number because part one crimes are kind of broken down a little bit differently, but that's largely going to be the part one crime section, which that includes that uptick in aggravated assaults and those types of crimes, which, burglary is a part one crime. And some people may not consider it violent, but from a law enforcement standpoint, it's one of those things that can definitely lead to violence. So that number of the 17% increase is reflective of crimes that would be considered violent and is the most alarming category when there is a rise in that statistic.
But you said you don't, I mean, that increase in crime is something that not just Redondo Beach is dealing with, and it's not a representation of any reduced workforce, correct?
Right. It's, there's a lot of policies and initiatives out there. Some of the zero bail policies and changes and reduction in incarceration rates. And the Prop 47, AB 109, it's had an effect on local communities. And with our ability to conduct enforcement, get charges filed, and keep people in custody that maybe need to be kept in custody. That's a much larger issue than I have actual control over. I just need to make sure that the police department understand what our mission is, and all of our employees do what we can that's within our control to try to enforce the law in an appropriate manner and make sure that we're doing what we can to keep the community safe.
Okay. Looking at the org chart that you had up there, I believe there was 3 different police captains roles listed. So does that mean we have 3 police captains on the force currently?
That's correct. Yeah, I promoted a captain, Steve Sprengel. I swore him in on Tuesday, and he filled the role that I vacated when I stepped into this role. So we do have all 3 captain positions currently filled with full-time personnel.
What of the 3 captain positions did he fill?
I moved him to the Patrol Bureau. So Steve Sprengel, who's a newly promoted captain, longtime Redondo Beach Police Department employee, he's going to be the captain overseeing Patrol Bureau, which also includes our jail operations.
All right. Speaking of the jail, there was some talk recently about, for lack of a better word, renting jail space to, I think it was Palos Verdes. What was the conclusion on that?
Well, it's not we're renting jail space. It's that Palos Verdes Estates had some complications with staffing and wasn't able. They don't have dedicated jailers. They have personnel that serve multiple roles, dispatch, jail, records, and they were having some staffing challenges. So we did a short-term contract to assist them with their bookings and help them process their arrestees. They do not have very many arrestees, and we were able to accomplish that with our existing staffing without any sort of increase in needing to add additional personnel to maintain that. It worked out to just a handful, 2 or 3 bookings a week. And we're actually evaluating that program now to determine if it's something that we're interested in pursuing for future years.
That is an additional source of revenue, I assume.
It is, but it's not very much. It's only probably about $30,000 a year. And we really need to take a hard look at if the small amount of revenue that we're getting balances out with the issues that we may face by acting as a booking facility for a longer term for another outside city. So that's something that we're currently evaluating.
Great. Do you know offhand when our current contract with them expires?
June 30th, the end of the fiscal year.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. You mentioned the quality of life unit. In layman's terms, what's the quality of life unit's role? How does it serve the city specifically?
It's primarily managing requests that don't rise to the level of a penal code violation, to make it simple. So most municipal code violations, leaf blowers, dogs off leash, dogs in parks, code enforcement issues, blight, boarded up windows, abandoned businesses, cars parked on the front lawn, things like homeless related issues, dealing with our quality of life prosecutor, our homeless outreach liaison, coordinating homeless court. There's so many issues in the city of Redondo Beach that fall into that quality of life category that it's demonstrated the community need for establishing those positions and expanding that unit so that we can keep that level of service going for the citizens.
All right. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. The last thing I had, so you mentioned the KPIs you listed, those were budget, projection, goals, and kind of to Commissioner Sample's point, do we have any actuals for KPIs, maybe for last year, something that you can share with the public that don't affect the confidentiality of the department?
I don't have the actuals with me. Usually we end up getting those about a year or so after. So we base our projections off of our staffing levels and the previous estimates, and then we end up getting the actuals much later. I do not have those available.
Are 2020 numbers available? It just seems to me like this type of information should be made available.
Yeah, I agree. Usually what we'll do is include the actuals from the previous years in the proposed budget document.
Okay, so maybe 2020 numbers are available in the budget document?
They will be in the budget document that we submit as the proposed police department budget for 22-23, but we're still working on putting that product together, and I don't have them available at the present time.
All right. Well, Chief Hoffman, I would ask that those numbers, when they're made available, are presented not just in the budget, but somewhere on the city's website, something that's easily available to the public.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they will definitely be part of the budget document, which is on the website and available to the public. But if that's a request, we could always take those performance measures and annually post them on our transparency portal on our website.
I think that would be great. I think the numbers are good news. Good news for the department, good news for the city. So why not share that information?
Sure.
And that's all I had for you. Thank you very much.
Great.
Joe, I have one follow-up question before I go back to Eugene, whose hand is up. Question relates to crimes. The general perception is that the homeless issues that we have are increasing levels of crime. Do you maintain separate statistics on homeless perpetrators or crimes caused by any of the homeless versus non-homeless? Can you identify that trend and tell whether it's increasing or not?
We may be able to do some data mining based on the address that's listed during a booking process. But my experience is that the types of crimes that we're experiencing, an increase in theft-related things and the violent crimes, isn't typically related to the homeless issue. And the homeless issue is more of a quality of life. And that's a balance of education and outreach and resources, offering resources, and then enforcement. And that's why we have a whole unit dedicated to that, working with the city attorney's office and the homeless court. So we could probably mine that data, but I don't think that that's a significant source of the crime increase.
Okay, good to know. Eugene?
Thanks, Chair Woodham. Chief, this might be a question more for Mike Wazansky than you, Chief Hoffman, but you were talking about salary analysis, and in the last decision package at mid-year, there was a decision package to allocate funding towards our competitiveness for salaries. And I don't recall that involving the police department. Mike, is that something that, Chief Hoffman, that you do internally to measure against other departments how our salary and benefits stacks up? Do you have a vendor doing that for us? How do we derive that information?
Maybe I'll start with that one, Joe. Yes, what you're recalling at mid-year is the appropriation for what we're describing a targeted class and compensation study or review. We're targeting probably roughly 25 benchmark positions in our organization. I expect at least one of those will relate to our sworn police personnel, and a handful will likely relate to both our dispatch, different tiers of dispatch, as well as our civilian police department personnel. So we will have benchmarks that will help us in that analysis to see how we're competing in the marketplace. But Joe, I'm sure from the department standpoint, you're generally monitoring other agencies and what they're doing, maybe not in the form of a specific analysis.
No, I mean, we pay attention for sure, but a lot of that is beyond the scope of what I have control over, and is, you know, collective bargaining through the various unions. We have multiple unions in the police department with the POA management, CEA, PSA, and it affects it at all different levels. And it's also not just the police officers, it's the other 58 positions within the police department as well, which are very, very important. I want to make it, you know, as clear as possible to the public that I value every single employee of the police department equally. Nobody's above one another. And as far as the pay and benefits go, we do monitor that and I pay attention to it, but I have to work with what is determined by the bargaining groups and then approved by city council.
And that's part of where I was going, and thank you for bringing that up, Chief, is the idea being that you're given a set of parameters and that's what you have to work within. It's not as though you can, with a wave of your magic wand, say, we're not competitive with the sheriff's department or some other agency, and just go ahead and say, we're going to increase our salary and benefits. This is all a longer, much more involved process that we have to work within, and that you're, pun intended, handcuffed by certain parameters there to work within.
Pay and benefits is a huge aspect of it, and what I have limited control over. However, what I do have control over is creating a positive culture and a good working environment. And I'm dedicated to doing that for as long as I'm in this seat and making sure that it's an attractive place for people to come and work.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just think it's important for the public to know what under the circumstances in which you're working when it comes to filling those roles, and how we compensate our police officers, and what restrictions or advantages you have in hiring. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Chief, we appreciate the time and appreciate the presentation. Doug or Jennifer, do we have any public comments or questions that come in?
Yes, we do have someone from the outside, somebody from the public that has a question. Let me allow her to talk. Sheila Lamb.
Hi, excuse me. This is Sheila, Redondo Beach, District 4. I do have a question. That is, you just talked about sort of quality of life for the police officers themselves. So the work that our police officers do can be very stressful. What kinds of programs and services do you have available for your police officers when they encounter stressful, life-threatening events?
We have a police psychologist that we have retained that we use on a regular basis. Anytime we have a critical incident, that we set up a debriefing session, and they've been proven to be incredibly effective. A lot of times in the initial phases, there's reluctance amongst personnel to participate in those types of events, but because there's no members of supervision present, it's an opportunity for the members of the organization that may have been in a critical, stressful, just traumatizing incident to be able to discuss it and then have follow-up meetings with this police psychologist at a scheduled time that's convenient for them, which helps them work through the situation. And that's been in place for some time, and we use it on a regular basis. In addition to that, we're currently right now evaluating various wellness programs that we're going to be looking at incorporating into the organization so that we can provide even more resources of a different nature that include resources other than just a psychologist for all the different personnel in the police department. There's a variety of programs out there right now that offer different things. We haven't found the perfect one yet, but we've narrowed it down to a few that we're evaluating to see how applicable it can be for the members of the police department.
How has the current police psychologist made a difference for your department?
Well, just being able to have somebody that isn't a member of the organization, that is a trained professional in dealing with stress and trauma-related incidents, they're able to put this type of stressful nature of critical incidents that the officer may have to be involved in into perspective and give them mechanisms for how to cope with those types of incidents. I've sat in on several of those incidents, and I've met with the police psychologist on numerous occasions. And it's amazing to me what a trained professional can do above and beyond our peer counseling program and some of the other internal programs that we have, providing opportunities for how to cope with the stress and potential PTSD, and also how it can be confidentially followed up on to make sure that we're really paying attention, focusing on and taking care of all of our personnel.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Doug, any other public comments?
No, that's it.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Again, Chief, we appreciate the time and your candor, and appreciate what you're doing for us.
Thank you, Commissioners. It was a pleasure presenting to you tonight, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Joe. You can feel free to head out. Appreciate it. And then I think next up, Jerry, is going to be Chief Kaufman.
Okay, good.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. I'll start off, give you a little bit of background to kind of lay the stage for where we're at the fire department. So I vacated the police chief position about a month and a half ago. About a year prior to that, in March of 2021, I was appointed as the interim fire chief. So I was doing both jobs for about a year. And the point of doing that was to conduct an assessment of the fire department. So over the past year, I've spent a lot of time trying to learn a completely new environment. And you will, if you tune in on Tuesday night at the council meeting, will be the culmination and presentation of this assessment to the public. So the council has yet to have the public discussion about that. They do have the document. They've had it for a while, and that entire assessment document, which is going to answer many of the questions that you will have tonight, will be available to the public as soon as it's posted for the next council meeting. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, please download it. It's about a 92-page document. If you add all the appendices, it's about 250 pages. So it's no small read, but it's fairly interesting. For me, it's been fascinating. And really, what I wanted to do was to get into the fire department, learn about what their systems were, what are their challenges. I hired a subject matter expert from the LA City Fire Department who happens to be a resident of Redondo Beach. And we did the assessment together. And to get the information that we needed, we interviewed, surveyed every member of the fire department, members of the public, at least one person that's on the call here, and then our city's leadership and various people from the community. So, I was involved in doing last year's budget for this current fiscal year that we're in. And I'll tell you, I had to make quick work of figuring out what direction to go. And at that time, it was major staffing concerns. And I was looking at issues that would arise if I were to fill all the staffing. So the current budget cycle that we're in was focused on what do we do if we fill every single position? And if we've been paying for maintenance and operation type things out of personnel cost savings because of not having personnel, how would that affect the budget going forward? So what we did last year was figured out what those items were, presented them to the council, and fortunately they funded many of those. So we're in a rather good position today. Now I'll get into where we're at now, and this year. I'll share my screen. Is that showing up okay for you?
That looks good.
Okay, wonderful. So here's the basic staffing of the fire department. We have 59 total sworn positions. That's including the fire chief, and we have 5 non-sworn positions. The biggest change that's occurred recently in the fire department is that we're basically fully staffed. We still have some challenges moving forward, which the council is going to need to weigh in on. Some positions that that may be declassified depending on direction. But as we sit now, we are fully staffed. And that's been a big boost to the organization. There were some serious concerns with the amount of mandated overtime that people were working and kind of a burnout and a general wellness of the staff. So we were able to, over this fiscal year, remedy that. And so what you see here in front of you is now about 100% filled. I've hired 11 new sworn personnel during this fiscal year. And one point that I'd like to make and kind of follow up on what Chief Hoffman was talking about, our ability to maintain these positions in full staffing is maybe even more critical in the fire department than it is in the police department because they have minimum staffing in their MOU. In other words, there's 19 people working at any one time. And anytime somebody's off, whether that's a vacant position, they're sick, injured, on vacation, administrative leave, or whatnot, that position is mandated by MOU to be filled with overtime. So it is it's a bear of a challenge to maintain those positions. And what I'm going to do, and at the end of this presentation, I'll give you a snapshot of what I'm going to ask of council, which is figuring out a way to kind of get ahead of this in the future so that we don't have that problem again. And basically it can be accomplished through overhiring, essentially stacking the deck, preparing for future attrition and never slipping again how the fire department was with 10 sworn vacancies. So the fire department's broken down into 4 areas. And that's what you'll see in the budget. So the first is the fire administration, which is basically myself, the interim chief, and then I have one analyst that is staff that works in the administration. And of course, fire administration is tasked with the overall management of the entire fire department. And then from there, much like the police department, we're broken down into 3 separate sections. The first of which is fire prevention. The goal of that section is to reduce the threat of life and property loss. This is where we have all of our inspections occur. This is, fire prevention officers are the ones that are going out issuing permits. They're looking at special events that are occurring in the city, approving all of those. So this is one of the more what I would call kind of proactive areas of the fire department where they're out, they're engaging the public, they're inspecting things, and they're tasked with preventing property loss and loss of life through preventative measures. The next 2 areas are fire operations and special services. Operations is basically the oversight of all specific fire department programs. This would include everything that we're doing at the fire department, whether that's the rigs that are going out, the sworn officers that are responding to calls for service during the year, the operations down in the harbor, wildland fire deployments that occur with Cal OES, all of it. So the fire operations division, which is run in our particular case, so instead of captains like the police department has, we have division chiefs that run each of these three divisions, and those positions are currently filled. And even though the way you're seeing this in the budget right now, operations, special services, and prevention, I'm not 100% convinced that that would be the best way to organize the department. And so in the assessment, you'll see that there are some recommendations that we become a bit more agile and maybe change some of the specific job functions of these division chiefs to address other issues that are occurring in the city. So this is what is in the past budget document. Once the department gets reorganized and if we move in a different direction, this is probably all going to change. The last section here is fire special services. This is one where the fire department's been charged and mandated with becoming the emergency manager of the city, the ability for our city to respond to a major disaster and plan for major emergencies in the city. This is actually an area of focus that was called out in the assessment where we need some future work, and there's going to be some budget implications to this that you'll see at the end. Here's kind of a at a glance look. One thing I think is very important for the public to understand, and Joe did the exact same thing, because this is often a misnomer. The public will see, wow, that's a huge budget that you're working off of, and there's not as much flexibility as you think in public service. And what this really shows is, the part of the budget that's under our control, where we are purchasing things, instituting new technologies, working on special projects, that's generally comes out of our maintenance and operation funding. And in the fire department, it's relatively low. If you look in 2021, it represented 2.68% of the entire budget. And that was obviously something that was rather alarming. And, I knew that it's going to take some additional funding going forward. And you can see in the 2021 budget that the council approved some one-time funding as well as some ongoing funding. So one of the things we look at as the chief of a public safety organization is what types of things are recurring year over year, and where can we add funding to our budget or request funding from the council so that we can meet the needs of the community or the current trends that are happening. And a lot of times this will occur in maintenance and operations. The bulk of the rest of the budget is in personnel costs and our internal service funds. So for the 22-23 fiscal year, I'm really giving a basic summary here because I haven't had the opportunity to present this publicly to the council and to the public as far as the entire assessment goes. And there are many things in there. There are 68 recommendations. But here are 3 things that we will be focusing on with you and with the council that we're looking for direction. And these are the types of things that will really help change the culture of the organization and move the RBFD forward. So the first one you see here is the institution of an overhire program. This will allow the fire department to maintain full staffing. I don't think it's great management to have a complement of officers that is exactly equal to the number of positions that have to be mandatorily staffed in the MOU. So in other words, in the fire department, we have 19 people that are working at all times 24/7. That number does not go up and down. So if somebody's sick or on vacation or the position is vacant, it per MOU has to be backfilled with overtime. If it's one position or 2, that's very, very manageable. But when you start getting into 10, the next thing you know, you have people that are working 4, 5, 6 days a week when they're really only scheduled for 2. That has tremendous implications on the staff. It can affect morale. It can affect their wellness. It can actually be dangerous. So that was a priority number 1 in this fiscal year. We fixed it by hiring 11 sworn firefighter paramedics, but that we shouldn't stop there. So my recommendation to this Budget and Finance Committee and will be to the council, and you're getting a sneak peek, is that we address this by instituting an overhire program. This can be done in a couple of different ways. For instance, if I knew that someone is retiring in, let's say, August of the next fiscal year, and we hire someone in July, the person's going to go out at a much higher salary than the one coming in. There won't be a budget implication. We'll be able to do overhires, in other words, sometimes three people or so, without having any implication to the current budget in that fiscal year. But what should also be considered is not only overhiring just based on what that known attrition is, but I would at least like to hear you and the council discuss a proposal of potentially funding additional positions above and beyond the current complement, so that when those vacancies are created, they're backfilled by someone that's already hired and on the books rather than mandating overtime. So that's what item number 1 is. Item number 2, administrative staff. This is something that has really affected the fire department over the years. You'll see in the assessment that the department went from having about 6 non-sworn personnel down to about 2, or actually it's 1.5. So it's 1 full-time, 1 part-time that are working with the administration to do the administrative functions of the department. You know, if you're looking at a $23 million budget and you don't have professional staff assisting the sworn staff, what happens is each of the sworn staff starts handling things that really they shouldn't be doing, in my opinion. In other words, I don't want to see a chief executive in the department doing clerical duties. I would rather have them spending their time leading the department and focusing forward. But because of the reduction in administrative staff over the years, it's really put the department in a precarious position, because each of the, especially division chiefs that are running all of these different divisions in the fire department, they have to handle all of their own administrative tasks. When I moved over as the interim chief, and without administrative staff to accomplish what I needed to accomplish, just by hiring all these people, getting the budget together, writing grants, all different types of administrative duties, I had to lean on personnel that were working for me in the police department just as a part-time fill so that I could get stuff done. It's a glaring issue, and it's something that really needs to be discussed and addressed. This also includes having our sworn firefighters out there constantly doing inspections that are mandated by state law on buildings that have 3 units or more. And that's something that could also be done by administrative staff. So what's going to be proposed in the next budget, if it is interesting to the council and they're willing to support it, is the addition of administrative staff in the department so that we can have our sworn personnel doing what the sworn personnel should be doing. And at the end of the day, the goal here is to provide a much better value to our community. And then one of the last things that's going to have a budget implication that will come forth in the assessment is the purchase of technology. The fire department's a little bit behind. We had to pay the company that Joe showed you, where he's getting constant trust and sentiment updates from the public, surveying the department to find out what the needs of the public. The fire department doesn't have anything like that. So what we did was use that same company and hired them to do a one-time survey so that we could get those answers and find out exactly what it is that our public is looking for and what their expectations are. And all of that, the results of that are all in the assessment. But it's stuff like that that should be moved into the fire department as well to really provide a better product to our citizens. One of the items that you see here was called out in the assessment, and I'll bring it forward on Tuesday night, is the purchase of some technology that institutes some new alerting systems in the fire stations. And this is a quality of life issue. Currently now, if it's the middle of the night and a call goes out, the lights go on, radios blare, alarms go off, everybody gets up, but you really only need a small cadre of people to go and handle the call. So this would also help our response times and institute some types of countdown clocks that are in all of the different departments, so that when the crews are leaving the station, donning their gear and getting in the rigs to go out, they'll know exactly how long it's taking them. That's basically it in a nutshell. It's difficult for me to present this to you because it has yet to be presented publicly to the council. So I'm giving you a high level snapshot, but in general, what everything that has a budget implication has been called out in the assessment. It'll be presented to everybody on Tuesday night. I'm happy to take any of your questions. I already see hands up. Let me stop sharing my screen here.
Okay, let's start across the top. Jason, you go first.
All right. How you doing, Chief Kaufman? Good to see you, and thank you for the presentation. And thanks for the service you're providing to the city and to the fire department. All right. So looking at your presentation, I saw 12 captains, 12 engineers, and yourself. So is that roughly 25 administrative and management type staff? And then was it another 24 firemen? Did I see that correctly? Or
yes, firefighter, paramedics. So no, they're not really administrative staff. So in the fire department, a captain is really a frontline supervisor. So that would be equivalent to what you would see as like a police sergeant or even a police lieutenant on the PD side. So no, they're not administrative staff, but I will tell you, I have captains that are doing a bulk of the administrative work that should actually be done by a non-sworn person. So they are administrators in some sense. In fact, everybody is, because of the fact that we don't have those personnel in the department. But generally, no, those are all frontline personnel.
so roughly 49 sworn personnel?
59.
Oh, is it 59? Okay. And then your personnel budget was 14.5 million, roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And that's just for sworn personnel, or does that include other people?
That's everybody. That wasn't broken down into, that's the total number.
Okay. What I was trying to get at is what the average cost of sworn personnel was, if we're talking about adding sworn personnel. So just taking the 14.5 million divided by 59 gets us to about 246,000 per employee. But you're saying that there's additional heads there. So,
and I would add to Commissioner that there's another complication in that these figures still in this fiscal year budget incorporate, and you all will remember this, our prior unfunded accrued liability allocations on a per department, per employee basis. And those, as you know, include legacy expenses from prior departmental personnel that the city was continuing to carry. On a go-forward basis, now that we have refinanced our unfunded accrued liability debt, that will be viewed as a baseline department allocation for our ongoing bond debt service payments. So the per personnel expenses will change going into next fiscal year as we make that line item adjustment following that refinancing of the bond. So it may not be worth doing the math just yet, in the sense that it's going to be significantly different on a per staff member basis going forward. Given
I would like to get an idea, though. I would like to get an idea, Mike. If we're talking about potentially overstaffing, I think it's reasonable to think like, hey, we would all love to have additional personnel waiting in the wings for when they're needed, but there's a cost to that. And what is that cost?
Yeah,
we talked. The Chief Hoffman spoke about, it was roughly 80 to 90,000 for a beginning officer, and you double that when you include benefits. So what are we talking about when we're talking about adding another fireman, paramedic, or so forth?
It's comparable, actually. It's not all that different. But I would say the beauty of an overhire program, if you are very targeted, and in the case of police, if you just go back there for a second, if we have anticipated vacancies or current vacancies, and there's lag in the hiring process, we are actually, when we do bring on an overhire, we are likely drawing against existing salary vacancies in the budget. So it may not actually, on a net basis, cost us any money. If we are bringing somebody on and we have 59 budgeted employees, and we're bringing somebody on 6 months before, say, somebody retires or is scheduled to retire, and there's overlap in that seat, then we do incur additional expense. So it depends on the timing of the overhire program, and exactly when those additional resources come on board. Typically, what we have asked council to do is allow us to go out there and start the recruitment for positions that are currently filled. But by the time we get them through the backgrounding process and all the applications and everything else, the vacancy becomes available to us. So it usually doesn't cost us as much as it might sound, but it really requires us to be very accurate with our schedule and projection of onboarding.
Okay. Beyond seniority and rank, where we have people that are retiring, I would assume people, move up into that position. But then those positions, the positions we're ultimately filling are the entry level positions, for lack of a better term. But and in general, are the retirees from have a different agreement, collective bargaining agreement, than the people that we're bringing in? Would that be fair to say?
Well, not different, but they're generally being paid at a higher rate than, say, an entry employee would be, or they're promoting, or they're retiring from a rank that's much higher than the firefighter paramedic rank upon entry. So, because most of what happens, right, is our captains, most of our folks will retire out as an engineer or a captain.
Yes.
What will then happen is they'll be replaced within an existing set of firefighter paramedics who will promote to those positions when they become available. And the ultimate vacancy will occur at the entry position.
Yes, agreed. Maybe let me ask the question differently. I recall there's, that we have, maybe it's city employees, not fire specific, but we have employees that fell under one agreement, and then after a certain year, hires after a certain point fell under a different agreement. That's what I was referring to.
Yes, I know where you're going with this. All new hires now, particularly at these entry-level positions, assuming they're not a lateral from, and they would have to be like a 15-year vet from a lateral organization. That's,
yes,
you get a lot of those. That's pretty uncommon. But assuming they're not there, they're likely to be PEPRA employees, as we call them, which means
thank you.
They're less expensive on a benefits basis because the retirement formula is less lucrative.
Yes. Okay. That's the point I was trying to make.
Yep. And that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
Okay. Thank you. All right. The next question. So Chief Kaufman, I feel for you. You came in, you totally helped out and got the fire department back on track and done a tremendous job there. You mentioned that you had to lean on the police, some police department personnel to help you out because they were so strapped administratively and they were understaffed. Now that the fire department, you've got them fully staffed, doesn't that eliminate some of that dire need? You know what I'm saying is now with a fully staffed fire department, is there still that dire need for administrative staff? It sounds like you're saying there is, but at the same time, we've got a lot more people in the department than we used to. So I can't imagine it's as bad as it was when it wasn't fully staffed. Is that fair to say?
No, it's better, but it's not fair to say, and I'll try to tell you why. So we got it back up to the complement that it was budgeted to, 59 swarm. What I'm saying is there's still a dire need for additional non-sworn administrative staff.
Okay.
What I was leaning on in the police department was the non-sworn personnel that could provide for me that administrative help to quickly produce what I needed to produce to move the entire agency forward. What happens is if your sworn personnel are dealing with the minutia of their divisions and commands, they're not able to focus forward on some of the things that could be more important and provide better value to the community. It's not an efficient way to run. So that's what I'm calling out as far as administrative staff goes. And what we're looking for is to add a couple administrative positions and then some non-sworn part-time people that can come in and assist with fire inspections.
Okay. Now, that makes sense. But also you would agree, we don't want fire or what was it? Department chiefs? What do you call them?
division chiefs.
Excuse me, yes, thank you. Division chiefs, fire captains, fire engineers. We want them all to be hands-on, roll up your sleeve type guys, right? We don't want anyone in a purely administrative role where they're just, where they're directing traffic and duties, but not getting their hands dirty. Is that fair to say or not?
Well, we generally, we want them to be able to fill the job function that they're sitting in. And
Okay.
what I'm saying is the job function that a firefighter paramedic is sitting in should be going out and providing firefighting, suppression to the community, and paramedic services. What's happening is they're being pulled away from that. So in one sense, I don't want them handling the administrative duties. I don't want a top-level division chief spending his day doing billing for fire inspections, and I don't want the other one ordering uniforms, and it doesn't make sense. What has happened, what we've found through the course of the assessment, is that has pulled the agency away from looking forward. So upcoming trends, threats to the community, planning, emergency management, hiring, grants, all of these things that you were asking of Joe, like, hey, how are you doing all of this? The fire department's not doing it because they don't have the staff that are focused on it. So we use the term in the assessment that essentially they have been forced to become consequence managers, handling what is available to them today without looking forward into the future. As a resident of Redondo Beach, and I think you would agree with me, I want our fire department looking at the latest trends. I want our fire department looking at the latest technologies. Bring those to the Budget and Finance Commission, bring those to the council, provide them with the backdrop of why they're needed. And if it's something that's going to provide value and save additional lives, we should move forward. That hasn't been the focus. And I think that we'll end up in a better place if we can kind of remove some of these administrative duties, and I can retask our department's leadership, redo what the expectations of their positions are, reorganize what they're tasked with doing. We're going to move the agency forward very, very quickly.
So by giving them this focus, focusing forward mentality, what you're saying then is it would increase revenues and save lives for the city?
Well, I don't know it's going to increase revenues, but additional administrative staff could increase revenues in the sense of finding additional grants or doing inspections at a much lower cost. If I send a fire captain and firefighter paramedic out to inspect a building, that's a lot more expensive than it would be sending a part-time fire inspector. And part of the other thing we need to do is we also need to help build kind of the bench and the farm team and bring people in from the community in lower positions in the department so that we can eventually get them into the sworn positions and have a fire department that's more representative of our community.
Okay. You mentioned the fire inspections. Now, the buildings where the fire inspections are carried out, they're charged for the fire inspection, right?
They are.
Okay. And maybe you know, maybe you don't know. How do we determine what that fee is? And does that fee cover the cost of the inspections?
It does. And so the fee is set in the fee schedule of the city. It's something that is looked at generally every year during the budget process. This year, we may be asking for an adjustment in that fee, actually lowering it. But we can increase revenue by spending less on the personnel that are going out there if we lower the fee. These are all things that are yet to be determined. But yeah, in general, we can run a much more efficient department with civilianizing some of these positions.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Commissioner Samples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chief. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate your presentation. And I think you're very much going in the right direction. It's something that, if you recall, that ugly thing that we went through a few years ago where we talked about turning our fire department over to the county, my question repeatedly was, what does it cost for us to really run our department? And I'm really looking forward to seeing your report, because I think we're finally going to find out just what that's going to be. So I do appreciate it. I'd like to make a couple of points for you, though. First of all, the term overhire, I know, to me, when I hear it, it sounds as if there's some abuse of the system, but particularly with the fire department, you have a certain number of seats that need to be filled every day. And if you only have enough people to fill those specific seats, you're not accounting for paid time off, injuries, and all those other things. We've already gone through the exercise before. If you have somebody that's assigned to that seat, but he's not there because he's taken a day off, you're paying that person for a day off, and you're filling that seat with an overtime person. So having a few extra people in the department isn't a bad thing, and it's not truly an overhire. And I really look forward to you getting some approved headcount to be able to do that, because I think it's good for you, it's good for the department, and it starts creating that bench you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think if we can create a culture that focuses and have the department's leadership looking forward, then we won't get back to a place where we have that many vacancies. Like right now, if we were to hire, we actually are in the process of doing recruitments right now. But the goal is to get those done, have them ready, have the backgrounds done. And then what I'll do is I'll work with Mike and I'll say, okay, I have a division chief paid at this level leaving this month. If we bring a guy on today, the delta between those two may not cost anything or have an effect on the budget, but it really takes focused management and leadership to not let that slip, and it's absolutely crucial. So you are true. You are right in saying that it may not necessarily be an overhire, because by the time it's done, the person's filling the vacated seat. The thought is, though, to always be aware and have that bench ready to go. It is way more crucial, what I'm finding out, or having delved into all of this, based on the MOUs, that this happened in the fire department, even more so in the police department. You guys asked Chief Hoffman, well, what happened? You're down 7 spots. Does that mean your overtime's going up? And he's telling you, no, not necessarily. That's because it's not mandated. He has agility in the agency to flex people around. We don't have that in the fire department. And those are things that I've been working with the fire association, and they're helping, I'm helping them to understand, and they're seeing the benefits of it. Because one of the other things is succession planning. If I have a division chief that's leaving in September, which I do, if I wait till September to put a division chief on there, that's terrible succession planning. I need to move someone in ahead of time so that we have this kind of, seamless handover, and we don't affect the product that we're providing to the community. So, overhiring and focusing forward on all these things have effects all across the organization.
Right. So my one other item for you is your call for a new fire station alerting system. It seems to me that we had a budget package probably 2 years ago where that was supposed to have happened. And I would have to question, I guess, did that not happen? Or, what's going on with this? They're not incredibly expensive in the grand scheme of funding the fire department, but we keep seeing things like this pop up in the budget, and then they kind of disappear and they come back again.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I can't speak to what happened 2 years ago. I don't know if that was something that was presented or not. It may have been, and it may have been a system that was put in place, and now we're even bettering it. I know that there's new technologies that can work with the new CAD system that's been put in place in dispatch that will allow for a more targeted alert. And what we found in the assessment, so I'm giving away too much here, but what we found in the assessment is that we have really good response times in the city from the fire department. They do meet those national standards. You'll see the data in there, but we can still do even better. And what we found is if there's an area to work on, we can do better at night. And the wellness of the officers or I call them officers, sorry, the firefighters and paramedics. This came up and was something that needed to be immediately dealt with. Starting to institute, the police psychologist is now the fire department psychologist. We have a lot of new rules in place to handle their wellness. But, another thing is there are certain nights when, the alarms are going off and the lights are coming on and not all of those people are needed. We need people to rest when they need to rest. And so the new system that we're proposing, it's about a $67,000 ask, I think. This is something that's just a newer technology.
I guess the one, I think, follow on to that is the idea of separating out those call outs and making sure that they're targeted to the people that have to roll out. The other side of that is having the personnel segregated in such a way so it makes sense. So many departments have their paramedic crews in a separate quarters from the general staff, because they're usually the ones that are in and out all night long and waking everybody else up. That being the case, considering the age of our department, or our stations, our equipment, is that something that at some point in time we should expect to see in the budget?
Yeah, you should. The infrastructure of the fire departments themselves is in need of some love and care. And that would probably be the time if there's a readjustment as far as the quarters to make that happen. But yeah, we are also working with, we have some asks in the CIP to upgrade some things with our facilities, namely even the security. At Fire Station 2, there's no security. If you want to walk through there and walk on in, if the door's open, you can. And that is not, things have changed. And, we need to put some security in place and kind of pay a little bit more attention to these facilities. So we are working on the CIP budget as well.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Eugene, you had questions.
Yes, please. Thanks, Chair Woodham. Thanks, Chief Kaufman, for the presentation. It's nice to hear that there's a fulsome SWOT analysis that's going to come out and be presented to the community. It's definitely something that I'm really glad that they had you and you took on the role of doing that, because it's something I know you're excellent at performing and working with. A couple of questions. If we go to this, to use the terminology you used, overhire program, is this going to require us or ask of us to reopen the current MOU? Is there going to be something like that needs to occur in order for your request to be processed?
So the answer is it depends, and it depends in the direction we go. And I'm gonna try to leave this as least complicated as possible, but we're actually proposing the rank of firefighter instead of firefighter paramedic. This goes into staffing of different vehicles and trucks and things, and kind of I don't want to get into it here, but yeah, in essence, on a small scale, I have a person retiring, I bring in a firefighter. No, there's not an implication to the MOU. We start changing classifications, make these systems permanent, or look for funding for them where it's done outside of the funding of the fiscal year. Yeah, there's going to be an implication probably in the MOU.
Okay, so it wouldn't be handled necessarily by a budget modification. For the second scenario, would an MOU reopening and renegotiation of that?
It could be, yeah.
Okay, and that could end up delaying what you like to implement.
Yeah, those things, you'll see them on Tuesday night. They're highlighted, things that have implications in the MOU, if there's going to be any types of reclassifications of positions. So the council will be well aware of which ones those are. But, in the background, I'm working with a very good fire association that is, paying close attention, working with me, working with the city, and everybody is kind of in a position of, okay, what do we need to do to move forward? So it's a good place to be.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned something in speaking about this idea. In the past, we haven't cross-trained personnel. Do you find that, is that something we've begun doing? Is that something that would help mitigate some of the overtime expense?
Clarify that for me, because we actually are an agency of cross-trained personnel, being that every paramedic is a firefighter and every firefighter is a paramedic. So they're doing EMS and suppression. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So if somebody, if it was a medical call rather than a fire call, for somebody to jump in there and take that role, would be cross-trained for the paramedic response.
They are. They're already cross-trained.
Okay, great. For one of the things that we were considering was a regional approach to our fire services with some of our local agencies. Would that, how would that impact some of the things that from an administrative cost and administrative crossover? Would it help us? Would it impact us negatively if we went to a regional programming for what you're suggesting?
So our research is that it would help us, and it would not impact us negatively. It would impact us positively. There would be a cost savings through a regional approach. What was namely identified was the sharing of battalion chiefs, where each city would contribute one. Generally, all the fire departments in this area, they work on a 3-shift system, A, B, and C. So what we would do is each agency would contribute one battalion chief to handling the emergency operations of the 3 cities in the time that they're working. And so in that, we would see not only a cost savings, because you wouldn't have the backfill of overtime, because that's also a mandated position if that person's gone. So you have a little bit of cost savings there. It's really more of an efficiency savings, though, because one of the benefits of doing something like that is it would help me refocus the other 2 division chiefs into more of an administrative mindset. In other words, they wouldn't be responsible for the radio and response to an emergency situation every day that they're working.
Okay, thank you for that. Have you seen some reduction in the overtime expense now that we're staffed up?
Yes, a huge amount. So, we're hoping we can keep it there. I've done some projections, but I'm hoping that we come in about $1 million less than we did in the previous fiscal year before we hired everybody. This was also it was a very busy year for us, a very challenging year, because we started those 10 firefighter paramedics in July. So right as the fiscal year began, there's a lot of training that's associated with that, even though they are filling one of those spots. So there's still some challenges, but keeping the department fully staffed going forward will greatly reduce the amount of overtime that you've seen in the past.
It's been a huge expense, and it wasn't always all booked there. It was booked in other parts of our budget too. The report that's coming out, I can't and don't really want to get into that, but for what looks like a reallocation or the way we detail or deploy our resources, has there been or will there be a cost analysis that's attached to the way we're talking about redeploying resources within the report, or something that we can touch on here?
Yeah, so we don't really make projections on cost savings based on a new deployment model, but there will definitely be that, because the use of all of the apparatus in the fire department that are constantly being deployed would be greatly reduced if we started targeting or tiering the way that we dispatch calls. So it's a pretty complicated notion. You'll see it laid out in the report, but the efficiency gains are going to be tremendous if we move in that direction. And that is obviously going to be the future of the fire service. We've seen other departments that are doing a tiered approach. They're sending appropriate personnel to each call, and it's a much cheaper way to operate. We didn't call out or project what that is. That's probably something that will have to be studied as it's being piloted.
So is that something then when, from our perspective, it's less so, but from the council perspective, if, let's say, this report gets reviewed and the council takes an eye towards, well, this is how we'd like to move forward with this, would then you be asking the council to fund another study beyond Mr. Castro's initial study about how we would redeploy it, or that's something that you can take on, or we can currently take on our own?
Yeah, we studied it enough. Chief Castro comes from LA City Fire Department, which had a tiered dispatch system and a very surgical approach to especially their EMS calls. So we know what the best practice is. We lay that out in the report. There's not another study that would be needed on that. I think, if you wanted to do another one, you would do a cost analysis of what type of money you save by doing it once it's in place. But no, there's really nothing else needed. And in this current fiscal year, projecting forward, because this is something we need to do regardless, having our dispatchers be able to assist the public with their medical needs when they call 911 is just it's a huge value to our residents, and it's pretty inexpensive to do. So we had an item that was already funded. I believe it was somewhere in the tune of $14,000 that puts a technology system inside the dispatch center and trains the dispatchers. It's just a matter of getting everybody the training and rolling it out. So it's really not expensive to do that.
Okay, so we already got that baked in. That's
yes. It's in progress.
Yeah, right. You may not be able to answer this, or I doubt you'd have. Well, I don't know. I don't doubt anything you can do, Chief. You might not have it up the top of your head. Have we seen, since we fully staffed up, a mitigation or reduction in our workers' compensation claims and expenses that have been coming in because we don't have people as heavily stressed physically and mentally on the job?
So I haven't done that analysis, but I can tell you that the IOD numbers have gone way down. Now that could have an effect or not, but the numbers of people that we have off due to injury are much lower than when we were not fully staffed.
Okay, that's great. It's another way for us to be spending money to save money in the long run.
For sure.
That's great. Well, I'll say it for Steve Johnson, who's not here. And I remember this being one of your favorite phrases, Chief. Hope is not a plan. So now we have something to plan off of, which is great. It sounds like some of these initiatives are paying off in different ways. What I would call leakage costs, potentially reducing our overtime, certainly, potentially reducing some of our workers' compensation expense, and some of the other associated expenses by moving towards a better administration of the department. So thank you very much for the presentation and your time tonight.
Thank you.
Keith, let me second that. We appreciate the work you've done and the advances we've made. Doug, do we have any public questions or comments?
There aren't any e-comments. No attendees, so there's no comments or questions.
Okay. Mike, we appreciate you and the two chiefs being here. This has been very illuminating and very helpful.
I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Chair. It's our pleasure to be here. And Keith, I think we can probably let you sign off, and I'll wrap up with any final questions or comments. And thanks for coming out tonight. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Thanks for having me. Good night.
You bet. Thanks. I suppose we should receive and file these two reports, correct?
Yeah, if you'd like, and if there are any more generic input comments you'd like to make, I'm all ears. If you guys are ready to move on to your forecasting, you won't get any complaints from me either. But I'm here to take any general input you might have as well.
Any questions for Mike?
I just say, with regard to the fire department and what Chief Kaufman was talking about, if there is a philosophy of redeploying our resources, and it sounds like he said that the costs would be have already been absorbed essentially, and what Chief Castro has done, but to have some sort of parameters or numbers about what changes might take place, what that might cost for initiating the changes in deployment, and then certainly the cost associated with the, to use the chief's terminology, the overhire program, so that the council has those numbers in front of them. And then for what we just talked about, if there has been a representative cost savings to our bottom line through fewer days on IOD, for less overtime expense, which sounded like it was a pretty big number compared to where we used to be, that I, for one, would think the council would want to know about that in assessing what they'd like to recommend.
Yeah, no, we'd love to have that. We won't have that for next week, unfortunately. We're just not there yet with that, but it's definitely something we'd like to prepare. And depending on council's reaction to the various follow-up initiatives, we'll begin to work kind of different costing models for them. And as we look at year end, as we complete the current fiscal year, 21-22, it'll be interesting to see exactly how our expenses come out, because being full will likely have saved a significant amount of money on the overtime side. And it'll be interesting to see where we finish with, total year-end actual expenses. So some of that material we'll probably need to mine, in the subsequent months after the close of the fiscal year. But yeah, each of these elements in the assessment have different implications, different cost benefits, sometimes different expense levels, and certainly tiered dispatch would create a whole new approach. And it may just be that what we identify is it allows us to deploy our existing resources more effectively and more widely, depending on the call for service. And so whether there are potential savings or not, it may be that the choice is to reinvest those prospective savings into a more expansive service model without increasing cost. I mean, there'll be a lot of options, I think, as we dig into this, assuming the council wants to go down that path.
Well, yeah, it kind of begs the question though, right, Mike? If they're going to look at what they want to do with the report that's being presented on Tuesday and have an action item, it's not that far down the road, I suppose, if they say, well, let's take a look at a BRR for all of these things. And it's really only a month down the road, because it would be May 25th or 26th is when our budget has to be presented.
May 15. Yeah, it'll be a month down the road. And then the BRRs could trail maybe a degree, those could be optional items for the council.
Right.
If we get clear direction on what they'd like to see right away, we'll probably build that into the proposed budget. If there are some sort of question marks as to options, we might present that through a follow-up BRR, which would likely come out in June, I would think.
Yeah, it seems like as a presentation of that cost being CapEx at this point, they might trail it to a BRR discussion at the end of May.
Yeah.
And whether or not then, based on your workloads for you and Jennifer and the rest of the team, whether or not you'd be able to put together that information that quickly.
Yeah, we'll certainly do our best. I mean, it's been right. Jennifer's we talked about this at mid-year. It's her first full annual budget. So she and I both have work to do in that regard over the next month. The BRR is probably the more likely outcome. And with the exception of if there's a very clear thing that makes sense for us to maybe give an estimate or propose in the budget an overhire set aside as an example, we could probably prepare that.
It seems like a little bit of a cart before the horse, because this hasn't been presented to council and we have no idea what they're going to do. But if we're going to make a recommendation as a body here tonight, based on what we've just heard, what would that recommendation be? Would that recommendation be that if the council decides to look at this report and wish to have more, our recommendation would be to format it as a BRR for X, Y, and Z? Yeah,
I think so. Prepare appropriate, as quickly as possible. Prepare, cost reporting options.
And I don't even know if that's something that we need to do or it's
Yeah.
something that,
I mean, I think I think I know what you'd all like to see. I mean, I want to see it too. I mean, we're all going to be eager for that data. So we'll likely move on that
okay.
based on council direction.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Okay, further questions or comments to Mike? If not, can I have a motion to receive and file these two reports, police and fire?
So moved.
Second.
I suppose.
Sorry, Chair Woodham. Let's do a roll call vote on this one.
Yep, right. That's what I was about to suggest.
Okay.
Because I knew you would suggest it to me. So go ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Jesty,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Conroy,
Aye.
Chair Woodham.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carries. Item J2, discussion and possible action regarding the 5-year financial plan. Jennifer, do I understand this is something we'll defer until next meeting, or do we have something to discuss on that front now?
Yeah, we can defer. And Mike, if you'd like to hop off, you're free.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll see you
Thanks,
again.
Good night, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, so I looked in years past, and this has been done either in April or May. And since we had that technical glitch, and when printing to PDF from Excel, one of 23 pages printed, and as, of course, and as you had noted earlier today, it's just not enough time. And we were pretty, we were heavy on the other important items for tonight anyway. So I think it would be great to just push it to continue it to the next meeting if that works for everybody.
Yeah, that's my feeling. What does the rest of the commission think?
Okay.
I agree.
Agree. Table it.
Okay.
I have a question actually, and sorry for not knowing this, but I was looking at the staff requests, and I do have an answer from a request about the credit card fees for other beach cities. Would now be a good time to discuss what I had found out about that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So this was questioned last month. So they do all charge fees to the consumer, varying from 2.13%, which is very interesting specific number, to 2.75%. So I received responses from El Segundo, Hermosa, and Torrance. And just so that you all know, we are still actively working to pass on that credit card fee direct to consumer, but we've just had technical challenges, so, shall we say. Everybody's working really hard on that. But again, that would solve, that kind of massive several $100,000 expenditure that's in our.
Sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I don't mean to, but
we're not allowed.
I think we need to close J2 first.
Thank you. Good call, Doug.
And I think maybe we can kind of throw this in as referrals to staff, like maybe somebody can just bring it up as
right.
If you have something to present or some information for the commission.
Certainly. Thanks,
Sorry
Doug.
about that.
No, thank you for bringing that up. That's I was remiss in that.
Okay, on J2 then, I suppose we need a motion to defer until next meeting, right?
Continue the item, I think.
Okay, do I have a motion to do that?
Motion to continue discussion of possible action regarding the general fund 5-year financial plan assumptions for fiscal 22-23, fiscal 26-27.
Second, motion and seconded. Doug, do a roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Jesty,
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples, Commissioner Conroy,
Aye.
Chair Wood.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and I guess let's do the member referrals to staff, and then we can come back to Jennifer's comments on credit card. So member referrals to staff, Commissioner Conroy?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Samples?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Commissioner Jesty?
I have no comments.
Commissioner Solomon?
I do have a question and possible referral, please. The question being, in the previous fiscal year, we set aside some money for the charter committee to fund a charter review committee. And I don't know if, I know the council is going to address that either at the next meeting or the meeting in May, whether or not the funding that is already there would be sufficient or not. And that's something I'm sure that the staff is reviewing because it sounded like it was going to be a much bigger number than when I heard City Attorney Webb and the council discussing it, the charter review committee itself, that it was going to be a much bigger number. So I don't know if that's something that that we talk about or refer to the council. I'm sure that they're going to talk about it and come up with however they're going to fund that. But I remember the money not being enough to fill, that was already committed to fill what they were talking about. The second thing is that I would like to come back and have the waterfront director or city attorney talk a little bit again about the peer associations and how our leases work in the harbor, as far as the fees that the members of the peer associations pay into it, and whether or not it'd be a good idea to review an idea of how that works for our leases or revenues. Are we leaving money on the table for revenues? This kind of thing, just to get a better idea of how our leases work in the harbor and how they generate revenues for the city versus what they're paying into associations and the sales tax, how that money gets distributed. I know for the leases, we really can't get into the very details of them, but we know they have a base rent plus a percentage of their gross revenues, that there are monies that flow through the city for memberships into the lease associations, just to get a better idea of how those things work and how the money goes from sales tax, circles back around to the city. I think people have a misnomer about all the sales tax revenues, that we get all of it and we don't. So just maybe for public and for us to talk about how all of that works. It's not an urgent thing by any stretch of the imagination, it's just an idea.
Okay. And I have nothing except, Jennifer, just a note, I assume the minute keeper is inundated with minutes again. That's why we didn't have minutes from the last meeting.
Yeah, I talked with Doug. I think Doug could speak to that. There was a glitch.
Sure. Yeah, I contacted Martha last week and reminded her about the meeting. And she had planned to send it to me on Monday. And then she was a little frantic. She was having some issues with her file and it wasn't coming out right. And I told her, at this point I had to get the agenda out. So let's just push it.
Okay, it's no big deal. I just thought
Sure.
so we could keep it in order.
Sure.
Okay, Jennifer, back to credit card issue.
Thank you. And actually, and Eugene, just to let you know, I do have from February your question about the charter committee, and I figured since it was going back to council, I believe it's going to council on the 19th of this month. Continuation, because I think we had talked about it not this past Tuesday, but the one before. So I'll keep that on here. So thank you. And yeah, I think I kind of spoke about the credit card piece, but just to continue and wrap up, we are still actively working on cleaning up that glitch on our end. And like I said, I think so. It was let's see, it's several $100,000 per year. And so the other beach cities do charge a fee. Nobody has exactly the technical setup that we have. And so, of course, there isn't a clean solution that we can necessarily mirror from another state. And I believe that was some of the question as well. And so, like, for example, Hermosa Beach has an earlier version of the software that we're using. And so we're just trying to clear it up because we're using our software and a third-party system and just trying to match it all up and maintain compliance of that charge. And basically kind of to get a little bit into the details so you understand, we can't accept the charge and then pass it on to the third party. It has to bypass our system, that 3% charge, and go directly to the third party system. And just so that you know, the system that we work with, Tyler Munis, only works with two other applications. So it's not like we can go out to bid and we can choose a specific application that we would like. We did our due diligence to work with the best one. So I'm hopeful that issue will be solved. And I'm happy to keep providing updates. And, I wish it was a little bit more positive, but I think we are getting closer to a solution on that. And again, like I stated, I did find out what the other beach cities are doing, and they are, able to charge it. It's just they've got a nuanced, a different software system than we have. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Mhm.
Any other questions of Jennifer before we adjourn? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I just want to throw it out there. We do have a joint meeting on April 25th
Yes.
with Public Works Commission.
Will that be virtual, Doug?
At this point, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.